Before we move on to the next point, I want to make sure we understand these calculations for PIA and AIME and understand how to use this information when making your plan. So this is two people I'm imagining here. This first person has an average index monthly earnings of $6,000, and the second has an average index monthly earning of $3,000. And recall that these values come from how much they were paying in over their 35 top earning years. So what we can basically imagine is if these two people are the same age, had very similar life, the big difference is the first person essentially had twice as much earnings over a 35-year period as the second person. And as such, this first person probably paid about twice as much in Social Security taxes over their careers. All right, so from that, we can look at their PIA and figure out what sort of benefit they're going to receive. All right, and remember, the benefits are regressive, essentially. What that means is as your income goes up, right, as your AIME goes up, the benefits you receive continue to increase, but they increase at a decreasing rate. So if you have very little Social Security payments coming in, earning an extra dollar in AIME is worth a 90% monthly benefit. But if you've already earned a lot of AIME, earning an extra dollar will only generate 15% in monthly earnings when you retire. And you can kind of see that here with the calculations. All right, so for this first person here that has $6,000, this is how I solve for their benefits. All right, I'm just going to sort of move through the brackets until I've exhausted every dollar. And what I find is they have about $2,400 in monthly payments. So once they retire, this is how much they're going to receive every month if they retire at age 67. We'll talk about age of retirement and why that matters here in just a bit. Second person here, if they retire at age 67, they'd receive about $1,500 in monthly payments. And this is what I mean when I say it's regressive. Think about it this way. The first person paid in twice as much as the second person in regards to Social Security taxes, but they do not get anywhere near to twice as much in earnings, all right? So for people who didn't earn a lot in their career, they get a bigger boost in regards to Social Security than people who had higher incomes later in their career. The logic here is that people who had a higher income do deserve more payments, right? They get more monthly payments as you earn more money, but they may not need to have, like in this example, they may not need to have twice as much in payments. So the Social Security system is naturally regressive. As your AIME goes up, you earn more benefits, but at a decreasing rate. A key idea here that we need to make note of, I'm just going to write it down here, bend points. Right now, the bend points refer to these thresholds, okay? So this $960 bend point is a big deal because if you've earned only $950 in AIME, you can see there's a big benefit in earning 10 more because you're receiving essentially a 90% benefit return. However, if you've already earned $960 in AIME, earning more benefits now is not nearly as valuable. So these little thresholds where you change the rate are known as bend points. And when you're thinking about your Social Security system, you definitely want to consider bend points in determining maybe when you're going to retire, okay? All right, so let's continue moving on through our key points here. So let's consider now the three uses of Social Security, and we've really already been discussing these to some extent. Remember, Social Security gives you three key potential benefits. Retirement benefits, which most people know about, but also disability benefits and death benefits. All right, so we're going to discuss these just a bit. We certainly want to focus the most on retirement. The reason being is that retirement's the one you can plan for, right? It's hard to plan for disability or death. You don't know when those things are coming. But with retirement, it's much more clear what you can do to improve your retirement situation. So we'll start first with retirement. And basically, we have just about everything we need for retirement. We've talked about how the benefits are calculated, how you earn credits, et cetera, et cetera. But the one key idea we haven't talked about is the age, okay? So full retirement right now is age 67. All right? 67 is the full retirement age. So if someone says they're waiting for full retirement, this is usually what they're referring to. At this point, you receive 100% of the monthly payments that we just discussed. So those monthly payments we discussed is what your benefits would be. If you wait and retire at 67, you receive your full benefits. Now, what does retirement mean? Does that mean you have to quit working? What exactly does it mean? Well, essentially, it just means you've decided to announce that you're retiring. So if you decide, you're going to quit working at 55, that doesn't mean you have to be retired. You can then wait all the way until any age to decide when you're going to be retired according to Social Security. All right. So, for example, my parents, they quit working when they were about 60, but they decided to wait until full retirement to start receiving benefits. You can also opt for early retirement, which is any age between 62 and 67. All right, you can't go before 62 in regards to Social Security. And you can imagine if you retire earlier, you're going to have more years to earn benefits. So the benefits you receive per month will be lower, okay? And so more or less, this is not exactly true, but this is roughly how it works. You lose about 0.5% of monthly payments for each month before 67. Again, that's not exactly true, but it's very close to true, okay? So you can kind of see the earlier you go, the smaller your benefits will be. And then you can also go late retirement. Which is between 67 and 70. So 70, you've got to retire by 70 for Social Security. And obviously you have no incentive to wait. Once you get to 70, they're just basically going to force you to retire, and there's no incentive to wait. Your payments will be maxed out when you get to 70, so you might as well start taking them. And essentially you gain 0.6% on your monthly payment for each month after 70. Or excuse me, for each month after 67. All right, so your payments will be smaller as you retire earlier, and then your payments will be larger if you retire later. And you should kind of recognize that a lot of people just default to 67 and say, well, Social Security tells me 67 is full retirement, so that's what I'm going to do. But there's nothing necessarily special about 67, all right? You might want to wait till 67 and a half or whatever, okay? Deciding when exactly to take benefits is kind of complicated. It's kind of hard to make a choice. Some of the factors you might think about here, you might think about your expected death. It's kind of a sad thing, but when you are in retirement, you end up spending a lot of time thinking about when you're going to die because so many of the retirement scenarios are based on this. Let's imagine you knew you were going to live to be 120. Well, if you know you're going to live to be 120, you would want to wait and retire at 70, right? Because if you're going to live to 120, you would like your monthly payments to be larger. You'll sacrifice a few years of no payments in order to get that extra benefit because you've got a lot of years left to enjoy those extra benefits. If you could somehow know you're going to die at 68, well, obviously you'd want to take early retirement then, right? The monthly payments, how much the monthly payments aren't a big deal if there aren't many monthly payments coming in. So you'd want to think about your health, right? You would want to think about the health of your parents. When did your parents, grandparents, when did they die? That's an indicator of when you might die. Do you smoke? Do you drink? There's so many things to consider here. But you would certainly want to think about your expected death. You would definitely want to think about your other investments and such that you have. Right? And this could be complicated. If you have a lot of stock, for example, if you've got a lot of stock in your retirement accounts, that's kind of risky. So you might want to reduce risk in regards to what you're doing here. If you have a lot of money saved up, maybe you don't need to get payments right away so you can wait till late retirement. Or maybe you think you're a really good investor and you're willing to take risk. Well, maybe go and take your payments early so that you have some money, extra money to invest. It's really hard to decide, right? There's lots of things to consider. And we're just going to stop now because you're a long ways away from this, as am I. So who knows, what situation we might be in when we're 62 and trying to decide what to do. There's also concern that they might push this back, this full retirement age, based largely on the fact that people are living a lot longer. So if you're living longer, you might also expect to be working a little bit longer. All right, so that's one use of Social Security. Let's talk about the other ones now. All right, so you've got retirement. You've also got disability. Okay, we've mentioned concepts of disability already. I'll just say now that lots of things are covered. Lots of illnesses and disorders and so forth are covered by Social Security. They have a long list of things. Some things aren't, but most things are. So for example, if you got cancer or something, of course, that would be potentially coverable if it affects your ability to work. And that's largely what this is based on. Does it affect your ability to work? About 1/4 of people become disabled in the eyes of Social Security before they hit 67, before they hit that full retirement age. So if you hear somebody say that they're collecting disability, this is usually what they're talking about, is they're collecting disability from Social Security. It's also possible that your work will give disability benefits as well if something were to happen. But this is definitely an important thing to note, because if you become disabled, you might not be able to work. And if you're supporting a family or supporting yourself, it's obviously a big problem. So Social Security provides a really nice safety net. It's kind of like a type of health insurance, right? If you become very sick, they're going to give you monthly payments so that you can survive, essentially. The benefits go to you, but not just you. All right, they also go to your kids, potentially. I'm not going to get into this in great deal, but they also go to your kids up until your kids are age 18. They also go to your spouse after your spouse turns 62. And finally, they also go to the parent of your kid. All right, and this is in the case of, your spouse maybe being different from the parent of your child. So what's kind of unique or interesting about this is, if I were to become disabled right now, I have 2 kids. My 2 kids would receive benefits until 18. My wife would also receive benefits until my kids hit 18. Then she would receive no benefits for a while. And then when she hit 62, she'd start receiving benefits for my disability again, okay? I can't remember if I said if I died. It's really roughly the same if you die or become disabled. It's treated very similarly. So if I were to become disabled right now, my wife and kids would get benefits until my kids turned 18. Then nobody received benefits for a while. And then when my wife hit 62, she would receive disability benefits from me again, okay? In the meantime, I would get disability benefits throughout the rest of my life based on AIME, based on how much I've been paying in, okay? It's kind of complicated, but essentially I've looked at the figures for me and my family. If I became disabled right now, the payments that would come in would be enough for me to survive. Probably have to cut back on my spending a bit, but that's it. It wouldn't be like I'd have to completely change my lifestyle. And that's what Social Security is trying to provide. It's trying to keep you capable of surviving, maintaining roughly what your lifestyle was before. But you probably are going to need extra money if you really want to stay at the same level of spending that you had in the past, okay? So it's a really nice program, right? If you don't become disabled, you're kind of funding everyone else who is disabled, but you could see why that's a reasonable thing. If somebody becomes disabled, they're going to be a drain on society if you don't have some sort of measure in place to protect them. And the Social Security basically protects you from disability. So disability works that way. I'm going to also just make note of survivorship, death benefits, and they're really very similar to these benefits we just discussed. If I were to die, my wife would get benefits, my kids would get benefits until 18. Then they would dry up. And then when I would have become 62, my wife then received benefits again. So obviously the only key difference is if you die, you don't receive any benefits if you're dead. The person who dies doesn't get any benefits because they're not here anymore. In the case of disability, the disabled person would receive benefits all the way until death, okay? So again, it covers 3 things, and I make specific note of this because I want you to recognize that somebody at some point is going to try to sell you life insurance. I get people message me all the time, ask me about life insurance. Life insurance is one of those things that I think is people don't really understand very well, to be honest, and they don't think about it correctly. I have students who get life insurance straight out of college. They have no kids, they have no dependents, and they get life insurance. I'm like, why do you need life insurance, right? You have no one to, if you died, there's no one you're supporting. So life insurance is about what you need. And it turns out that Social Security provides some pretty significant life insurance benefits. So you definitely want to figure out what your life insurance benefits are before you go out and spend a ton of money on life insurance. And by the way, life insurance is covered in the very next set of videos, so we'll get to see that compared to Social Security very soon. All right, so that's the 3 uses of Social Security. Getting pretty close here. Going through all the key ideas that we need. We can now talk about taxes on benefits. So when you receive Social Security payments, you might wonder, is that treated like income, right? Or is it treated like capital gains or something? So for example, if I get $60,000 in Social Security retirement benefits when I'm 70 years old, how is that $60,000 treated? Well, as you can probably guess, it's not simple. It would be nice if it was treated in a very simple way, but it isn't, okay? It's kind of complicated. A portion of benefits are taxed as income, all right? And the rate that they are, rather the share that is taxed is based on your income amount. And I'm not going to give you guys mathematical questions on the exam because I think that would be a little unnecessary, but it's nice to see how this works because obviously if you're paying taxes on Social Security, then Social Security is not as beneficial as it would be otherwise. So we need to see how this works. So these are not tax rates. Let me say that now, all right? These are not tax rates. Instead, these percentages reflect what share of your Social Security benefits will be taxable. If your income is very low, all right, if you have essentially no income and you're receiving small Social Security payments, you're going to end up facing no taxes. 0% of your benefits will be taxable. But for a lot of people, they will fall into this threshold of 80%, all right? And let me show you just a little example so you understand what this means. Let's say, for example, that I have $60,000 in income when I'm retired, which is roughly what I'm expecting because I've got my pension plan, right? I also might be cashing out some traditional accounts, traditional 457s, traditional 403Bs, HSAs, right? If I cash out from those accounts, it's treated as income. So you might end up with $60,000 in income, and on top of that, also be receiving, let's say, $50,000 in Social Security. Okay? In the eyes of the government, these are different things. They don't really see this as income. All right? They see it as Social Security benefits. And so these would sort of be compartmentalized. This is regular income. This is Social Security income. All right? At this income level, which is probably pretty close to what a lot of you will receive, it's roughly what I'm going to receive. You guys will probably be at about the same level as me when you retire on average. This will be taxed as income, but only 80% of it will be taxed. So a lot of people fall into this category here. I'm not going to get into the specifics, but 80% of this would be taxable. So essentially your taxable income would be $100,000 in regards to how the federal government views it, right? All of this would be taxable. 80% of this would be taxable. So your taxable income would be $100,000. And the only tax you would definitely pay on this is federal income taxes. Which is kind of funny, right? Because the money comes in from the government and then they just take a whole bunch of it away right away. The issue here is that they would rather let the tax code and the tax system figure out what to do than try to estimate how much they should give you, right? Rather than just giving you $40,000, which would be a lot of work for them to figure out, they're going to let your tax filing figure out how much you really should be paying and receiving. You would pay federal income taxes on this $100,000. You might pay state income taxes based on what state you're in. I'm not going to get into that. And you would definitely not pay Social Security or Medicare, right? You're not going to be paying any Social Security or Medicare on probably any of this, All right, if this is pension payments coming in, or if this is like cashing out a 401k, that is not taxable in regards to Social Security or Medicare, okay? So you're probably not paying any sort of Social Security or Medicare taxes on that, and this is never subject to Social Security or Medicare. So you're only going to pay federal income taxes on this $100,000, and also possibly state income taxes depending on what state you're in. Georgia is pretty lax. They generally tax very little on Social Security. As our seventh point here, our seventh and final point, I think it's important to think about the future of Social Security. We made note of this in a prior video. There's some concern that the Social Security system is going to have to change based on the fact that it's really unsustainable right now in terms of how it's being run. The good in regards to the future of Social Security is no payments have ever been missed. In other words, the federal government has made good on all of their promises to all Social Security recipients throughout the history of the Social Security program. Everyone who was expecting to receive benefits received exactly what they were promised. So that's the good thing. They've never failed. So you might think they're not going to fail in the future. The problem is that there's budget issues in regards to Social Security. The government saves extra money for Social Security in a trust fund. So you can kind of imagine, if you're working right now and you're paying into Social Security, some of the money you're paying into Social Security is going to the retirees. And then another chunk of it is going to this trust fund that basically just holds a big pile of money in case there's not enough to go around in the future. The government knew that it was going to have trouble funding all these baby boomers that are retiring right now. So it had saved extra money in Social Security for that time when you get that rainy day where lots of people are retiring and you need to spend it. The problem is this extra money the government has been spending for other reasons. So the government has been borrowing and spending this money. Which isn't necessarily a problem. A lot of people see this as a big negative. It's really not. The government basically would rather borrow from itself than borrow from another source. If the government takes money out of this trust fund and uses it to spend on, infrastructure improvements, it doesn't have to pay any interest because it's borrowing from itself, right? You don't have to charge yourself interest. But if the government goes out and issues bonds and borrows money from the public, it has to pay interest on that. So the government would really rather borrow from itself than to go out and borrow from the public. The government has always paid money back, so they promise that they're going to pay this back. That's probably not such a big issue, but I make note of it now because a lot of people think it is, okay? The bigger issues are in regards to how the liabilities are changing over time. Life expectancy is going up, not at a super fast rate, but it is still going up in the U.S. I guess at the moment, because of the coronavirus, it's probably not, unfortunately, but over the last 20, 30 years, the trend has been a very slow increase. You can see that's actually a problem for Social Security, right? The longer people are living, the more benefits have to be paid out. So essentially, the liabilities that Social Security faces are getting larger over time. You're expected to live longer than your grandparents were expected to live, but Social Security was built on your grandparents' expected age of death, right? So it's getting more expensive to maintain Social Security. So the 6.2% tax isn't changing, but the benefits that they have to pay out are getting larger and larger, which makes this system unsustainable in the long run. And I think we've mentioned this number exactly before, but it will basically run out of full funding. In 2033 or maybe 2034, they're going to get to the point where they cannot fund all of these beneficiaries, okay? Based on current trends, if we don't change anything, in 2033, they're not going to be able to make full payments. So what's going to happen is the government is going to have to raise Social Security taxes, figure out an alternative way to raise money for Social Security, like increasing income tax rates, or they're going to have to reduce benefits for Social Security, right? They could push the age of retirement back. They could reduce how much you receive, right? Those PIA percentages we talked about, they could lower those. So something is going to have to change in regards to Social Security. At the same time, birth rates are going down in the U.S. And would that be a good thing or a bad thing, you think, in regards to Social Security? Birth rates going down. That's a bad thing, because remember that Social Security benefits come from the people that are currently working. So the problem is, when you and I are retired, we're not that different in age. We're going to face a very similar issue. When we're retired, there's not going to be as many workers as there was before as a percentage of the total population. In other words, what's happening right now is the percent of people who are over 67 is much higher and growing every day compared to the percent that are working. And a big reason is because people aren't having as many kids. If suddenly people had twice as many kids, then there'd be tons of people to pay for us when we're retired. But as long as the birth rate is going down and life expectancy is going up, Social Security is bound to have problems. All right? So what does this all mean for me and you? Well, one thing it means is Social Security is probably going to change, and so you're going to have to learn how it's going to change over time. The system that they use right now, a lot of that stuff will probably stick around in terms of how it works. You know, the age brackets they have, PIA, AIME, all those stuff will still remain most likely, but the values will change. The AIME calculations will change. The PIA calculations will change. So what you're learning today will probably still be useful, but the rates and everything about the system will just be amended through time. So basically, what I think you need to take away from this is you probably need to save more because you don't know what your Social Security benefits are going to look like. My parents could count on Social Security. They knew it was coming in. I don't think you and I have that same luxury. We probably will receive full Social Security benefits. They'll probably figure out a way to fund that, but they might not. All right. So for me, what that means is I'm going to save more money because I don't know for sure that these benefits are going to come in the future. That means I'm going to put more money in my 457, more in my HSA, more in my Roth IRA, just to guard against the potential that I never get my Social Security benefits. I'm going to take just a second and actually show you my Social Security situation. If you go to ssa.gov, you can set up an account. This is run through the United States government, and maybe you don't have one of these accounts now, but you're definitely going to want to have one because you can use it to sort of see what's going on with your Social Security benefits and everything. And so right here, for example, it tells me if I were to become disabled right now, I'd receive $2,000 a month in disability payments. And that's based on, disability and survivorship stuff is really complicated, but it's based on my age and how much I've worked. I haven't quite got enough for retirement benefits yet. Remember, you have to have 40 credits, but I easily have enough for disability as long as I continue working. So anyway, and what I mean by that is if I were to suddenly quit working now and then become disabled 2 years from now, that might make me ineligible. So it's based on kind of what you've been doing very recently. So you can see here, this is my last reported earnings. So I'm showing you guys how much I earned last year. This is my Social Security earnings. So this is my income minus insurance payments, minus HSAs, minus FSAs. All right, that's the way it shows up on my tax pay stub and such. And of course, it doesn't include any rental income or anything else that I've had. I can click here and view my earnings record. So this is my earnings per year. You can see way back in 2005, I had a job when I was in college. I got paid on that. These years in here, I worked a little bit for Georgia College when I was a student here. I also was a grad student here and was making, decent money, $20,000 to $30,000 a year. But teaching assistants do not pay Social Security taxes as grad students. However, if you are a research assistant, you typically do. So there's some very strange rules with Social Security. And then this is how much I've earned in the year since. You can kind of see that it's somewhat constant, in this period, and then there's a drop off. This is actually when I started really using my benefits correctly and started understanding how to use the HSA and FSA and everything. And that's why these years here are a little bit lower as I was kind of figuring that out. And then income went up here. I got a raise and was working a little bit more. So you can see Social Security, this is how much I've earned. This is my Medicare earnings. These are the same. Social Security and Medicare taxes are set up the same. This is at 6.2%. This is at 1.45%. And so this is how much I've paid so far, $35,464. My employer in Social Security has paid the same because you pay 6.2% and your employer also pays 6.2%. I can also see my estimated benefits here. And this is showing, again, if I became disabled, how that would work. It also shows in terms of survivorship. If I were to die right now, basically, just to simplify things, my family would get $4,620 a month until my kids were over 18, and then those benefits would generally dry up, and then they would actually come back when my wife retires. Kind of complicated, but basically, if you're working, this provides kind of like a life insurance policy. So $4,620 a month, that's kind of a lot of money, right? That's over $50,000 a year. So when you're thinking about whether or not you want life insurance, you want to understand how your Social Security payment system works. And up here at the top, in terms of retirement, here we go. To get retirement benefits, you need 40 credit hours. Right now, I only have 32. So I need to work essentially 2 more years to earn those 8 additional credits, and that will be enough for me to hit that 40 credit threshold. And remember, the 40 credit threshold in regards to retirement doesn't mean you stop getting extra benefits. It doesn't mean if I continue working after 2 more years that my Social Security benefits will stay the same. No, it just means that if I don't get to 40, I'm not going to get any retirement benefits to Social Security. So this might matter, maybe you and your spouse, one of you decides to stay home and only work, 10 years after having kids. Maybe one of you decides to stay home or something. Well, you might want to think about trying to get to that 40 credit threshold. Because if you don't get to 40 credits, you might be essentially wasting some pretty easy money to earn, because it's pretty cheap to earn credit. So, you might be able to get a part-time job, pick up a few credits a year to get to that 40 credit threshold. So that's my Social Security account. You might want to set one up yourself. SSA.gov, pretty easy to set one up, and you can see what your earning history is.